Welcome to SHOWBIZ TELL, a monthly podcast from the Georgia Entertainment Public Relations Alliance. And now, here's our podcast.
Welcome to SHOWBIZ TELL, the podcast where public relations professionals deliver a backstage pass to join us as we uncover secrets to success in the entertainment industry. Our special guests will share their favorite show-stopping moments, tried and true business acumen, and telltale adventures from sets, stages, screens, and concert halls. And now it's time to SHOWBIZ TELL. I'm Melissa Sanders.
And I'm Elise Riley.
And with us today is Christopher Escobar, Executive Director of the Atlanta Film Society and owner of Atlanta's beloved Plaza Theater and most recently the Plaza Theater. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Our podcast is called SHOWBIZ TELL for a reason. We're leveling up the typical show and tell concept we all grew up with to focus on conversations about how the business of entertainment works. Chris, we've asked you to bring something interesting to show and tell us about to kick off today's podcast. What do you have with you today?
So I have a little poster that's a very treasured memory for me. This is a poster from an event, and you can see it reads, "An Evening with Francis Ford Coppola." This is from an event that when I was in undergrad at Georgia State University, Francis Ford Coppola came to the school. This is 2007, May 10th, 2007. And he came to the school to screen an early cut of a documentary that his wife, Eleanor, had made called Coda 30 Years Later. And this is about him making a film 30 years after having made Hearts of Darkness when he was making Apocalypse Now. And so this is why he was creating Youth Without Youth, which is really in many ways kind of the first film in a long time that he had written and directed, as opposed to just been hired to direct something. And so it was really neat because he was only showing it to two schools, one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast, and chose Georgia State University. And then after the screening of the film, he did a Q&A. And at that Q&A, I was able to ask him the first question, of which the answer kind of changed the course of my life. So, and so I, in super short, what I asked him was, about what advice he could give to young filmmakers to find our own style, because he has such a distinct style. And one of the things he talked about, among several things, was about how formative having a background in theater was to him as a creative and as a storyteller, particularly as a director. And so he feels like every filmmaker should have a rooting in theater. And I had done a little, live theater stuff in high school and drama and stuff like that, but hadn't really done much then. And so the next morning I declared a theater minor. I was already a film major, but declared a theater minor, sought out an opportunity to get involved with the community theater. And then it was kind of part of what called me to get involved with the Plaza Theater early on in my time with the Atlanta Film Society. And so what's really neat, though, is just a few months ago, back in February, we were able to welcome Mr. Coppola at the Plaza Theater, and we were doing a screening of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And he came, and Eleanor came, and so I actually had her autograph this for me, because ultimately this was about a screening of a film she made. And I've gotten to spend some time with him now on a few occasions, even after that, and I get to share that story that night, welcoming people to the screening. And it's just, he didn't know my name, he didn't know who I was. He was, I was one out of, probably 20 people who asked a question, but it had a transformative effect on me. So I love that. And to this day, I'm now on the advisory board of the Rialto where this took place. So it's kind of like there's all this connective tissue of all these different parts of my life now connected to this one night. So
that's tremendous. So he's really had an impact on your career and your journey, hasn't he?
Yeah, big time. And not just, as he inspires so many through his films and his filmmaking, but, how he's talked about the creative process, how, the things outside of his films in addition, and he's came and I've had an opportunity to see a little bit of the new movie that he was shooting here in Georgia. He's editing here in Georgia. And got to give my thoughts, and that was kind of an out of body experience. So yeah, so this is a rewarding story, and I've kept this poster ever since, and in my home office and my work office and back in my home office again, where I mostly work from, just as a reminder of kind of how this kind of one moment could be so transformative in somebody's life. So
that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
Tell us how it feels to be the longest serving and first minority executive director of the 47-year-old Film Society. And what advice do you have for other minorities looking to enter the industry?
So I'll kind of break this down a couple ways. I guess in some ways they're related, but the longest serving part and then the first minority part, both imbue me with a sense of responsibility. Part of the longest serving part, for better or worse, it didn't take long to hit that. And I've been doing it for 12 years now, but I was the longest serving 6 years ago. So, wow. And really early on, I've never sought out to be an arts administrator. My training is in filmmaking and storytelling. I have a professional background in event production and video production, but I never sought to be in the nonprofit art space. But I did join our board of directors first, and then when it was a kind of a time of crisis, I became the head of the staff. But that's part of what I realized early on, was that even though this organization is as old as it is, and it's one of the oldest of its kind in the country, the tenure for my position is very short. And the reason being, to kind of simply say, is at the end of the day, the organization has been and still continues to be, even though we improve, underfunded, as arts in Atlanta in general and in Georgia at large are pretty underfunded, and I mean even comparatively to cities this size and other parts of the country. And so it ends up meaning that trying to do this work means a lot of work when you don't have a lot of resources or a lot of help, and you're trying to pull off things that are maybe slightly out of your reach, and try and find a way to make it happen. And so my predecessors have largely been able to have a certain amount of visibility and been able to find other opportunities where they can work as hard or less hard and make more money, and so they do, as people do, as in their careers evolve. And the difference for me has been, I realized that was kind of the trap the organization had fallen in, which it never grew above a certain size, because it basically just kept having people change on the staff and the board all the time. And so it was just kind of had this stunted growth ability. And so I was like, okay, so part of what's going to have to change is someone's going to have to stick around long enough for that to mold to start to be broken. And then the minority side just means I have both a responsibility, an obligation, and an opportunity all at the same time, right? To take what has been largely a pretty diverse organization. It was founded by not one person or one institution, but by men, women, Black, white, Jewish, Christian, like people from all facets. But it was very much by committee. It wasn't any one person's baby. And so it was diverse in that there's always been a place for everyone. Although that, while there have been men and women in the leadership roles, it's never been a minority or a person from an underrepresented group. And until I was in charge, that was also true not only for the executive director position, but for the artistic director or creative director or festival, whoever is ultimately in charge of the programming. That was also true. There was a combination of men and women, but so we started to change that. And so, we had the diversity on screen, we would have the diversity in the audience, we'd have the diversity at the table at large, but there was still some work to be done. And so it meant, there was a opportunity there to build on some of the prior success, but be able to, complete that circle. And it's something that we pretty actively look at, on all levels and facets of not just who we're representing and who we're inviting to be a part of the festival, but the audience that then speaks to and represents, but also from volunteers to staff to board to contractors. Like, we want to make sure that if we are the Atlanta Film Festival, that we are representing all of Atlanta. And we also have to constantly challenge ourselves to think about that in different ways. So like, that was true from sort of an ethnic and gender standpoint from the founding of our organization 47 years ago. But as they got into the 80s, they realized, okay, we also need to make that representative from an orientation standpoint, and they partnered with an LGBTQ organization to launch Out on Film, which is one of the first LGBTQ film festivals in the country, and ran it for the first couple decades. And it has since spun out and become its own nonprofit, and it's now 30 years old, right? So it's certainly established and grown up and completely independently run. But more and more, we're realizing that we need to, again, how do we think about that? And now that means that from an ability standpoint and an accessibility standpoint, representing folks across different abilities in the spectrum of them, we got to think about it that way too. So it's like, you sort of start out and go, hey, these things are important. You feel like you're doing a good job, but realize, okay, we're actually maybe not looking at it as, cross-dimensionally as we should, and broaden our view and broaden our thinking. And that just ends up making a richer experience for everyone.
Yeah, very true.
I love that. Doing some amazing things. So tell us, what is your secret sauce? Like, how is your business model for your theaters, the film festival? And why do you think that model has made these all so successful in this industry?
Yeah, I would say for the theaters, it's a little different from the festival and the society, but they do have commonalities. So in the way they're different, the film festival is primarily focusing on new films, right? New released, particularly independent or at least art house, but mostly independent films. And that's when we look at what we do throughout the year, we get a little broader, but that's still strictly newer films. We don't tend to do a whole lot with older films. Whereas at the Plaza and Theater, kind of the secret sauce will be a blend of old and new. That's part rooted because these are both historic buildings, the Terra being 55 years old, the Plaza being 84 years old.
Wow.
And part of what we have to offer is leaning into the nostalgia, leaning into the unique experience that no one can just recreate and build. And, you can't just, from scratch, make a half-century old movie theater that people have been going to for generations and experiencing and sharing stories and creating memories. Like, you can't just make that. You can build a building, but a community makes that. So that is part of what they have in common, is the model for both, and the model for the film festival is how collaborative can we make this? Film is the most collaborative art form that exists, and frankly, one of the most collaborative things humans can do, aside from just art forms. And so we always try and find ways where others can be a part of it, be they individuals, be they organizations, venues, companies, etc. Where someone, it's like, yeah, we're the ones organizing this, but we don't have to just so tightly control every single little facet of it. In fact, it's better when we can find a little thing that somebody else can take and kind of run with. And if that's like the High Museum or Dad's Garage or the Carter Center, and and be involved in various facets. So in that regard, the Film Society and Film Festival and the Plaza and Terra Theater have a lot in common, because part of what's most successful at the Plaza, for instance, is our programming partnerships, is when we can partner with a Videodrome or a Wussy Magazine or an E-Division or a Silver Scream Spook Show. And we work together to kind of figure out a few particulars, what day, what time, what's the focus, that sort of thing. But with that partner, a lot of times they'll largely lead the kind of marketing and messaging, and they'll kind of come up with some of the films they want to show. We work on actually securing those and making sure we can. The Plaza will be the ones, projecting the film and running the event, but they will be the ones a little bit more out front with the customers and do something special before the screening, and, maybe lead something afterwards, have some cool, special, unique merch, and, all that kind of stuff makes it a unique experience that maybe only happens one time ever, for that film and that time. And you had to kind of be there or you missed it. And so, that collaborative nature might take shape in different ways between how the Plaza does it and the Film Festival and Film Society does it, but the ingredients of that secret sauce are the same, which is the collaboration. And particularly with parts of Atlanta, again, be they individuals, organizations, companies, whatever, that are unique to us and are part of what makes, Atlanta awesome.
Very true. What has been the toughest hurdle you've had to overcome in your career, and how did you navigate it? And what did you take away from the experience?
I don't know that there's a single hurdle, but I would say just an ongoing challenge for me is trying to do a lot in a short amount of time. I've kind of always been wired of even if I live to be 100, I will not have enough time on this planet. And so like I generally don't have time for a lot of other things that are just distractions, because there's a lot I'm trying to get done.
Right.
And so, you know, it's sort of the combination of time management, my own expectations management, and wrestling those between what I'm wanting and trying to do and reality and like hours in the day. And, you know, so I just think the hurdle is in kind of in the prioritizing and organizing and, you know, sort of wrestling my own physics in my brain of how long things take or whatever, you know. That's so, yeah. So in some ways, time and space, physics, biggest hurdle. But no, I mean, you know,
all of us.
yeah,
So
yeah,
true.
yeah. I mean, I will say I've, you know, obviously it would always be nice to have more money and more help and more time on things, but at the same time, I've gotten better at learning how to do things in a way that don't, you know, try and not create a tremendous amount of risk financially. And so we can experiment and you know, and try, you know, fun new things. You know, so, I mean, that's no one has an infinite time, money, or, you know, resources and help. So that's true for everyone. And so I've just gotten, I think over time, I've gotten a little better at navigating that. So.
Yeah.
So all of the hosts of this podcast are public relations professionals, Elise and myself included. So naturally, we're curious to ask you a little bit about that area. Can you discuss the role of public relations or marketing in your business strategy and how that's affected your success?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty pivotal. I mean, at the end of the day, we're living in a world that is an attention economy. We're living in a world that's more and more subdivided and niche and specialty. And, you know, I'm sure there was a time where if you get, you know, picked up in one or two different media outlets, everyone knew. That's just not the way of the world anymore. And, you know, and I got to imagine that the role of public relations probably started with how are we going to pitch this to one or two, and now it's much more of an expedition guide of like how we're going to hit all of these different stops and avoid pitfalls and not die and you know, ultimately reach the summit, right? So you know, for us at the film festival and the plaza, where we have limited advertising dollars, you know, for us, our strategies are all about what we can do to generate press, or what we're doing to directly engage from a marketing standpoint our customers through our website, our email, our social media, you know, and in our SEO strategy. But we largely aren't taking it, you know, doing big advertising campaigns. We just don't have those resources. And not that that's not effective for certain brands or entities, it's just not within our, you know, capacity. So it's more about how can we garner attention and engage the public either directly or through, you know, the media outlets that are trying to tell stories and share things with people that are interesting. And there is, I got to imagine that it is harder to do the job of public relations than ever, because the attention is now so divided that it really takes someone who has relationships with these outlets, that can navigate to them, that can understand what they do or don't care about, because attention is now so divided also within the people in media, be they journalists or be they influencers or be, you know, whatever. So I feel like, you know, the need for a public relations professional to navigate that is more necessary now than ever. So.
Right. Yeah.
We, of course, like to hear that. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Sure.
We agree 100%.
Yes.
What advice would you give our younger audience looking to break into the entertainment industry, especially during these rapidly changing times, such as education pathways, internships, networking, and any other avenues you would suggest?
Yeah, I will say there are some things that have changed. You know, as much change is happening in daily life, a young person's not going to really know that change because they won't have really known what happened 5 years before. So,
Sure.
So those of us who have been working for more than 5 years, we see that change of 5 years ago and 10 years ago and 15 years ago, but they wouldn't. But I would just say that there are some things that are still universally true, which is number one, you got to get out of your apartment. That's advice that my mentor K. Beck at Georgia State would always say, which is like, yeah, you can have your social media and you can have your emails and you can have all that. But at the end of the day, where real relationships happen is face to face and meeting people. And because all the kind of cliches and truisms is it's all who you know is true, you know, and you got to network to get work, and your network is your net worth, and all these, you know, things. That is true. But what it might feel like, especially if you're somebody like me who, you know, I come from a single parent household, working class family, you know, that valued education, but was not in any meaningful way in connected to the entertainment industry. And so that seemed like, oh, so if it's all who you know, you have to like be born with like an uncle or a parent or somebody who knows who's some exact. That's not true at all. You can, you know, it is all who you know, but you can do everything in the world to change that, right? But you can't do that from home, right? You have to get out. You have to go to events, you have to meet people, you have to learn, you have to take things in. And it's not enough to meet somebody once. That doesn't mean you have a relationship. It means you've met them once, right? A relationship is fostered through lots of different engagements and interactions. And that might be at a more social function, that might be at a work function, it might be some, you know, other social something or other. Like, you know, the most meaningful interactions for me are kind of multi-layered, where there was a work thing I helped them with, maybe a work thing they helped me with. We shared some time at a social thing. Like that's when you really start to know someone, as opposed to it's someone you've met or a colleague or a, you know, person. Yeah, an acquaintance. Exactly. Thank you. I was struggling for that word. So, you know, so you got to get out. Now that being said, it is in some ways easier than ever to navigate that, right? So for instance, like, you know, tools like LinkedIn and text and WhatsApp and social media platforms and email, these things should work in tandem with creating your network, expanding your network. I will say the thing to not do is expect that you can just reach out to somebody on LinkedIn and now you know each other. Like that, at least for me, like if I've never shaken your hand, like, no, we're not connecting, right? Like if at minimum somebody who I know is not introducing us or whatever, but like that's never the way you want to just try and meet someone kind of coldly at first. Those kind of tools are great to know who the people you know, who they know that you might want to get to meet and stuff like that, right? That's a great way that too many people don't use those tools. It's a good way to follow up when you meet someone, right? So maybe the nice and old school way of if you were able to meet someone or they did something nice for you, gave you tickets to go to something or whatever, you might send them a handwritten note. You know, that's a nice kind of old school touch. But at minimum, you're going to send them an email, right? Or at minimum, you send them a message on LinkedIn or something. Like you do some sort of follow up just to kind of reinforce you and that you show your appreciation. And you might never hear back. You know, but I almost guarantee that it's been seen, and maybe not right away, but maybe eventually, and that leaves an impression, leaves a mark, right? So, you know, you've got to be able to get out, you know, and I would say, you know, that doesn't mean you just go to random bars and hope relevant people show up, right? It means you go to things where that, you know, industry is around, right? So if it's with the film and television industry, that you're coming to film festivals, you're going to screening, you know, premiere type screenings, you're volunteering and getting involved with some of the several organizations in this space beyond just the Atlanta Film Society, you know, Bronze Lens Film Festival, Georgia Production Partnership, you know, Women in Film and Television. Like there's a whole variety, like with specializations and niches to be able to get involved with. And so volunteering is a great way. That's kind of one of the ways I first got involved with the Film Society. Was I became a member and I started volunteering, and the volunteering, you know, led to me meeting other people and things like that. So, so you've got to get out, you've got to get involved. You've got to also, when you're young, and particularly for people who have a whole bunch of interests, which there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't just expect that those interests will help self-clarify. You've got to get yourself some more exposure to what those careers are, what it's like, what it takes, how you can get there, what's great about it, what sucks about it, like all that kind of stuff, to help start narrowing it down a little bit. Not to say that people can't have multiple careers, but you got to start with at least one of them, right? Like you can't start all of the careers at the same time.
be
So
a
maybe
little
you eventually
challenging.
do them. Maybe you swing between one or the other, but you got to kind of start with one, right? Doesn't have to be the forever one. You just got to start somewhere. So that's, I mean, some of the broad things that I think are still holding true. It's advice I got, when I was first, going into school, and that's largely still true. It's, if anything, it's a little easier to keep up with people and to find out about stuff that's going on, and to get invited to, or to, get a ticket to, or whatever. But some of those things are still true.
Yeah, that's very good sage advice for sure. Thank you.
The tried and true network, get out, do internships, talk to people in person. Yeah, definitely.
Ask questions, from folks about, hey, what's other stuff I should check out? Who are some people I should know?
Yeah.
One of the other things too, because most people think they're the only introverts, and like, newsflash, the vast majority of people are introverts. The vast majority of people don't like meeting strangers. The folks who just love getting out there and have no problem being the only person they know in a whole room, that those people are in the minority. So if you're like most people, and meeting people you don't know and being in a room of mostly strangers sounds intimidating, the secret hack is bring somebody you do know, right? Have a wingman, wing lady, wing person, whatever. Because then you always have that other person. Sometimes you might break off and you meet some other people, and then you're introducing each other. But that is the huge shortcut into being an event. And that makes the world of a difference between something feeling excruciating, or this is actually fun, and now I've met 4 or 5 people, and those people are like, oh, this is great, let me come introduce you to this person. Like, it becomes contagious in a good way.
Networking buddy system.
Bring a buddy.
Well, so, kind of on that note, I think it's, you talked about some of the different, platforms that are out there for networking. So kind of on that note, I mean, what are some of the innovative technologies that you think are shaping the future of the film world?
Like AI.
AI is an undisputed one that I think there's going to be a lot of work and conversation about what that means for screenwriting, what that means for actors, what that means for visual. I mean, there's not going to be a job that won't face some, with the big question will be, does it make it better? Does it make it worse? Does it live parallel? I don't know. We'll see. I've never watched The Matrix or Terminator, but I'm sure it all works out just fine. No. But I think, other technologies I think it's becoming a little easier than ever, again, to not just, organize your network and, again, see what are the extended degrees of separation. But, there's a number of companies now that are doing things to help try and organize the mess that is, what is such a freelance based industry into, like, how do we organize, streamline this a little bit more, organize this a little bit more, because there's so many things. I mean, if we can figure out how to make it where people feel comfortable getting into strangers' cars to be driven from point A to point B, or going and renting out your bed to people, like, there's got to be a solution in figuring out how we make this work, right? So I think those technologies are certainly shaping the film production world. Obviously, streaming platforms are changing how we view. I think, when you tell somebody about a movie, the next question they ask is, what is it on, right? Like, we don't even think about that, but people are already asking, like, what streaming platform is it on, or what show is that platform on? And I don't know that it's, it's a mix of for better and worse, because I think more content is getting made now than ever. Not just that was true with the digital revolution, where people were able to make stuff, but now that's happening on the big commercial industrial side too, where there are more companies making, more content, and that will ebb and flow over time. And, as some of them decide they do or don't want to stay in this. But, I don't know if it's a good thing that, so while there's opportunities for more stories to be told, like, I feel like we don't really have a common sense of who's watching. Like, you can't, if you're watching a show, you can't even talk about the show because that person may not be on that episode anymore. Like, we have no sense of commonality or shared experience. And that's honestly why, despite all the disruption in a movie theater and movie theater going, part of why the Plaza is doing better than ever, because it means a bunch of people come together and watch the same thing at the same time. What a novel concept, right? And honestly, half of the tickets we sell annually are to movies that people can watch at home and for free. So they come and pay us tickets because they want to see it, right? And they want to see it with other people, some of which they know and some of which they don't know. So I don't think that it changes everything and everything will be forever transformed. I think it's just a part of the evolution, right? In the same way that sound evolved film and color evolved film and television ended up evolving film. It started getting wider. It started, whatever. I think this is part of the continued trajectory of things not being exactly the same, but also not being completely disconnected from what they were either, right? It's part of an evolutionary change. And these things, not to say it's ever going to go away, but I think it will continue to evolve. I don't think even what streaming is today will be what streaming is in 10 years from now.
Very true. If we had a backstage pass to your life, what would we see on your plate right now? And what would we see in the pipeline?
So I don't know when people will be listening to this, but at the time of recording this, I'm doing, we've wound down from the festival having just wrapped up, and we're kind of, what are all the things we can learn from it as we're still kind of coming back out of COVID. It was a very big year. We had more name talent involved than we've ever had, probably multiple festivals worth. We had so many venues and so many organizations and other partners involved than we've ever had. So many cool places of Atlanta that were the backdrop for these amazing stories from around the world and from around Georgia. So we're coming off of that, what we learned. At the same time, I'm working on getting the Plaza Theater open, which we're hopefully going to be doing here in very, very short order. And then we have a number of different programmatic projects at the Plaza in the works, some really cool things we're working on and trying out, some physical projects too, because we're currently about to be about halfway through a restoration revitalization across 3 phases. The first one we completed last year, where we converted our old balcony into 2 small 41-seat auditoriums that are state-of-the-art and super awesome. And so now the Plaza has 3 screens, but the next chapter we're embarking on is redoing the bathrooms, the concession stand, the bar, doing restorations to our exterior, so everything can just be a little bit more consistent of that experience. And then the last and most transformative part will be, we're going to be adding dressing rooms and a green room backstage. We're going to be adding an elevator for the first time in nearly a century. The Plaza will have more accessible access in different parts of the building, and that will ultimately lead to a rooftop patio where we have a 4th screen and a bar and space for about 200 people. So all that's playing out over the next 12 months, as we're then already working on the 2024 Atlanta Film Festival. So
Congrats.
That's wonderful. Yeah, we're really looking forward to that, all of that opening up. We have our final questions for you. We like to call the Blitz, which is a lightning Q&A round. Are you ready?
Sure.
What is the one movie you never get tired of seeing?
I have a few, but the one I'll offer is for anyone who's able to watch. I have the Ocean's 11 poster. That's a movie that I can, I own in basically every format. If it's on television, I'll stop and watch it, even though I own it and put it on at any time. And then if I'm ever like kind of working overnight or something like that, like I can just have that movie playing and I don't even need coffee. It just, I can pay attention or not pay attention, but it just keeps me going. It's fun. It's interesting. It has so many elements to it. It has such great style. I love Steven Soderbergh and so much of what he does. I love that he's from Atlanta, so so that's a favorite for me.
That's great.
Favorite music venue?
I think it depends on the kind of music. I love going to the Fox for anything, especially for a big show. I mean, the Fox is worth a ticket anyway, even if nothing is happening. But I also like small shows at Eddie's Attic, or going to Variety Playhouse, or so it just depends on the event.
What's your favorite thing about Atlanta, or what makes Atlanta unique?
I would say those have a similar and related answer. I mean, my favorite thing about Atlanta is how, and I kind of came to this realization when I had a very big kind of existential sort of imposter syndrome moment of a couple of years into being executive director of an organization that is many years older than I am. I've submitted before I was in staff, I submitted my films twice and got rejected. So I couldn't beat him, so I joined him. And but just like how does that happen? And then I started to realize that what makes Atlanta special is not like how other cities are defined by their sort of natural topography, although we have more trees than anybody else. There's other things that define other cities, but what's unique about Atlanta is our people and how any of these people can become anything. And Atlanta, it's appropriate that it's the Phoenix city, because for a lot of people, it's where they come to start a new life and start a new chapter of their life. And it might be where you want to come and have a calm life, and you can have that. It might be where you want to come and do big things, and people can do that. And I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying, but I think there are more possibilities here. There maybe could be a little bit more support, but there's definitely, I feel like, less obstacles, right? At least. And I think that's part of why Atlanta for so long now has been a place where Black people can succeed and be leaders, where we can have a thriving LGBTQ community, where the Jewish community has been able to have roots and have a place, where we have more. I think we have more women business leaders here than most cities. We have and if you think about the companies, the individuals in art and business and civic and social life, I mean, for a city that's not the first or second or third, or we're not even in the top 10 largest cities in the country, and yet we have a disproportionate number of Grammys and Emmys and Oscars and presidential award Medal of Freedom winners and Nobel Prizes, and like there are things on a national and international scale that should kind of not be possible for our city our size and a city our age. And yet, because of the people here and the sort of tenacity of whereas in most cities, the question is like, well, who are you? I feel like in Atlanta, it's like, well, yeah, why not? You give it a shot, So I feel like that is something that we don't realize or think about enough ourselves. And I don't think, outside of Atlanta, people do. But if you stop and take stock of all the amazing things that this city should not have been able to accomplish, and the inhabitants should not have been able to accomplish. I mean, we're still the most successful presenter of the Olympics, which everyone thought was going to be a disaster. I mean, that's a while ago, but like that's exactly right. So I mean, we still have our issues. Like we still, traffic is still an issue. We still have certainly some social tensions that are issues. We have inequities are still an issue. We're the most unequal city from a earning standpoint. Like we still have challenges, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everything is great, but I also think that if anyone can overcome these, it's us. And we have such a storied and varied and challenged history that I think other places would have definitely have been a failure by now. Like if you were to just look at our history, we should not even be a city anymore, and we are. And an amazing one. So I feel like the challenges that we have, if we really focus and come together, we can really tackle. We've had issues where we disagree too much about how we deal with traffic, and so we do nothing or whatever, right? But when we come together, we can save the Fox from being torn down and make it, one of the busiest theaters in North America, second only to Radio City Music Hall. That's nuts, right? That should be in Chicago or LA or somewhere bigger. We have the second largest arts institution in the whole country, the Woodruff Art Center. The only thing bigger than the Woodruff Art Center is the Lincoln Center in New York City, right? That's also kind of nuts, right? We have the busiest and probably most efficient airport in the world, right? 24-hour news was invented here. Like there's so many things where it's the hip hop capital of the world, right? This the DIY, movement through Home Depot. Like all these things are kind of like, oh yeah, that is our thing, but it's like, that's pretty awesome and special. So the trees or the hills or the whatever, like, no, it's the people that actually make it most unique and make it most special. And part of what I love about it.
I agree.
That's great.
So tell us, favorite hobby?
I don't have a lot of free time, but when I do have free time, I love playing video games with my kids or nerding out with my kids and stuff.
What's your favorite game to play with them?
They're really into Fortnite, so I've gotten into Fortnite with them. I will say, I had thought I knew what it was and played it years ago, and I was like, meh. And then what's interesting about it is how much creativity exists in that, where it's, there's the kind of core game, but then it's kind of open source and people can create, finding games and racing games and all kinds of these other things that exist in that space. And what I, again, took for granted, but it helps me realize is like how much my kids love like being able to like change the dances and the emotes they have and the accessories and the skins and the it's like they don't even want physical toys anymore. Like they want to be able to have
community for sure.
It's his own thing. Yeah. And so what's kind of cool is I have a fourth grader and a first grader, and they do something that they enjoy together. And they also do it with other friends from their school who are across different grades. And I don't know that there's a lot of activities that kids, in an elementary school across different ages would like work together to do and like form friendships. And so like my kids have field day this week, and so they'll be cheering on their fellow Fortnite friends because they have like this camaraderie. So it'd be hard to argue that that's a positive outcome of that. So
definitely.
And what was the last book you read?
I'm working on 3 different books right now, but I'll focus on one of them, which is Rainn Wilson's new book, Soul Boom, Why We Need a Spiritual Revolution. And I'm a little more than halfway through that. And we actually had him out at the festival for the release of that. So this is one of the most recent releases. But it was amazing. I mean, I'm a huge fan of The Office. My whole family and I have been watching it for, over a decade now. We've seen probably every episode at least 30 or 40 times. And so to be able to not only meet him, which is all cool for those reasons, but to see how he's being able to take that celebrity and engage, people's hearts and minds in this new and profound way is interesting, and he's still obviously, loves that part of his whole life. And chapter makes a few little references throughout the book. He had a previous book called The Bassoon King, which was really terrific. And particularly for anyone who's an up and coming actor, I would definitely recommend that because I think it's a great firsthand account of somebody who's trying to navigate from not being connected with that world into trying to make a livelihood with it. So, yeah.
And finally, what would people be surprised to know about you?
Well, I have a couple sort of useless talents that are fun. One, I can really recognize voices, like in animated stuff or commercials or anything where you only are hearing that voice, you never get to see that face. I can very quickly place that person. Be great if I can find some way to make money with that, but I got nothing. So it's just a fun thing. And then in high school, I was in a musical production of Will Rogers' Follies, and I had to learn how to trick rope as a result of that. And that's the kind of thing that is so weird and bizarre that you can't do it until you kind of break in that muscle memory, and then you can't lose it. So that's another useless talent I have.
The next year's film festival, we're going to see Chris Escobar.
Definitely not. It is the nerdiest thing about me. There's quite a number of nerdy things. That is yeah.
Love
very
it.
nerdy thing.
Well, that's all we have for SHOWBIZ TELL. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast at GEPRA.net/podcast. And follow us on social media. Special thanks to our wonderful guest, Chris Escobar, Executive Director of the Atlanta Film Society and owner of the Plaza Theater and Terra Theater. Chris, thank you so very much for sharing with us today. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you've been entertained and inspired as much as we have.
Thanks so much. It was real fun chatting.
You've been listening to SHOWBIZ TELL, a podcast presented by the Georgia Entertainment Public Relations Alliance. I'm Melissa Sanders.
And I'm Elise Riley.
See you
next time.